chapter 3. Lesson 6, Esther 3. Anyone need a class book? Oh, you got one back there?
Yeah, I have one back there.
Okay. You need one?
I've got one.
Okay.
I brought mine.
As we begin, I'd like to ask Brother Freddie to lead us in prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for blessing this day, for giving us our being and continuing our life in this earth, and for this opportunity that we have to come before thee this morning to open your words of wisdom to us and to enlighten our souls and strengthen our faith and continue to be the examples for thee that we need to be. We pray that thou be with Brother Mark as he stands before us, that thou will be with him, that he can convey this to us. We pray that thou forgive us of our sins, continue to go with us through the further portions of this worship service, and may all things be done according to thy will. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
You know, we look at some of the things going on with Esther, and the world has changed in a lot of ways, but it still remains the same, doesn't it? A lot of evil in the world, a lot of people plotting and planning against those who are trying to be righteous and good, plotting against God's people, and but we look at all we can do is what we can do, but sometimes I don't think we realize what we can do. You look at Esther, and she's probably looking at it from the point of view, what can I do? And Mordecai reminds her, you could have very well been put in this position for such a time as this. And we look at Esther and say, yeah, but she was the queen. What can I do? But in big ways and little ways, there's such a time as this in our life. I mean, times that we can stand up for something or against something, that we can reach out to someone and help someone in some shape, form, or fashion. You never know when it's going to be such a time as this. But the bottom line is we can just continue to live the Christian life and do what we're supposed to do, and leave the rest in God's hands. Any comments before we get into chapter 3? We've kind of set the stage. Well, we have set the stage. We look at how Esther became queen, that Vashti did not do what the king wanted her to do, and he banished her from ever seeing him again. They had that, bringing in all the young ladies from around the empire to come to the king, and him to select which one he wanted to be his queen. And out of all of those, Esther was the one that was chosen. Kind of a lengthy process. It took a number of years there from the time that he banished his wife until Esther was made queen. But you can see God's hand at work in all of this. I mean, how she wound up going from an orphan girl to queen of the land, and being a foreigner as well, being a Jew, which evidently there were some attitudes toward the Jews at that time. And so it's just, you just see God's providence at work through it all. And you will in this also. We're going to notice that, here's but Haman that comes on the scene, and he is going to try to totally exterminate, wipe out the Jews. Why does he want to get rid of the Jews? He doesn't like them. Okay. Started with Mordecai. What did you say? It made it personal. Sometimes people can hate a whole race of people because they've never made it personal. But once you get to know somebody, you realize, hey, just because they're different than me, not all of them are bad people. And just because people are like me don't mean they're good. I mean, when you put a face on it sometimes in a personal relationship, it can change our views. But in this case, evidently he had some feelings against the Jews to begin with. I think that's kind of evident. We went back and looked at his history there, going back to the Amalekites, and that very likely, a descendant through them. And then you have Mordecai with Saul, and so you have that confrontation that took place long ago. There could be some built-in hatred and animosity there. But when Mordecai refused to bow down to him, and pay homage to Haman, that was it. I mean, it was very personal. You have embarrassed me. You have not acknowledged me, and you're supposed to bow down to me. But rather than just striking back at Mordecai and maybe even executing him, I mean, that would be an extreme measure to kill somebody because they didn't just pay homage to you. But he's going to wipe out the whole race of people. And what's interesting is the king's going to allow it. Why would the king go along with it? I mean, he didn't even say who the people were. He just said, here's these people. I want to wipe them out. Can I wipe them out? What made the king go along with that?
I'm thinking that, maybe he didn't know who the people were, for one thing. And another thing, he wasn't given enough information by Haman in order to make a decision like that.
He should have asked a few more questions, shouldn't he?
Apparently, he didn't know Esther was one.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't know who was included in that race. He didn't know who was included in that race of people. His lovely wife, his lovely queen was one of the people that he had said you can wipe out. And so, I mean, if he had known that, he would have thought twice, or at least put some exclusions in it. If you're in the royal family, you're not included. But the way that Haman laid it out was simply, here's this race of people that they're not following the king's commands. They're throughout the whole empire, and they're rebellious people, stubborn people that really won't do what you say to do. They follow their own laws, their own God, and everything else. And they're going to cause trouble, and they're throughout the whole empire. And if you'll let me do this, we'll have plenty of money to put into the king's treasury as well. So he played to it's not going to cost you anything. How many times we hear that? When something's not going to cost you, and it winds up costing you. But he's promising money for him by plundering, I'm sure, what's left of what the Jews left behind when they killed him. But also, we're getting rid of a troublesome race of people that are going to cause you trouble. And if they haven't already, they will later. And so the king's just like, you handle it. And it seems that the king at this point has a lot of trust in Haman. Haman probably knew how to kiss up and knew how to look good, and he was doing that to the king. And so at this point, the king trusts him completely, gives him his signet ring. And so you can imagine as Haman walks out with the signet ring of the king, he's thinking, it's all mine now. And it really seems almost too simple the way it worked. But the king, you don't see a lot of sympathy there. You don't see a lot of love at all. Or like, how can we wipe out a whole race of people? I mean, he can be a very vicious king. I mean, he's a king over a world empire. And so, I mean, a strong empire. And, he just, if you don't bow to him, I mean, the pride that plays into that as well. So that brings us to Esther chapter 3, and we'll skip on down to verse 12 is where the lesson text picks up. Well, we'll go back to verse 10. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you. You take care of it. You don't have to report to me. You just handle it, and it's all okay. So then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman had commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to all the officials of all people, to every province according to its script, and to every people in their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus, it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring. So even though Haman's writing this, he can write it on behalf of the king because he gave him a signet ring. That means you can sign my name to it. You can put my stamp on it. It's just like the king gave this command. And so he calls in all the important people. He calls in the leaders and all from all the different provinces. All the governors from each province are there to make sure they get a copy of this letter. And they can see that this is an official letter. I mean, it's not just Haman's idea here. If it has the seal of the king on it, you better do what it says. And the letter was sent by couriers into all the king's provinces. Now here's what it says. So it's going throughout the whole empire. Destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews. What's the difference between destroy, kill, and annihilate? What's he saying? Do like Hitler did? Okay. I mean, not just push them out of the kingdom, not just cause them a lot of harm, not just cost them a lot of money. Don't just confiscate their property, but you're basically going to wipe them out as a people. You're going to kill them all individually. You're going to just take away everything that is theirs and just wipe them out like they never existed. And I mean, pretty harsh. I mean, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. So he said, he puts it down to months later. I mean, you know, you have it on the thing goes out on the 13th day of the first month. They're going to do it on the 13th day of the 12th month. Why wait so long? You remember? Didn't they cast like lots? About, they call it a purr, I think is what it was called, kind of like drawing straw. I mean, they chose a date, and they wanted their god or whatever to make the decision, I think. And so you kind of cast lots for it, and it fell on the 12th month, on the 13th day of the month. And so that's when they were going to do it. Now, you can't help but think God's hand's in that as well. I mean, you would think if he was wanting to get rid of the Jews, you'd want to do it pretty quick. Maybe give it a little bit of time to get it out to the provinces and have a set day, maybe a month down the road or so, or 2 months, to get everybody in place and ready and have everyone strike out. But, you know, a lot can happen over the course of almost a year. I mean, you know, a lot of things could change. And so it seemed like he's taking a chance there. But again, I think it's God's hand. But also he knows it's been written in the law of the Medes and the Persians that when you write it, it cannot be changed. And so so he thought, well, you know, I can wait that long. I mean, that's plenty of time. It'll give them time to sweat and to be afraid and to fear and to worry about what's going to happen. Imagine you're one of the Jews and you realize, hey, it's counting down, 11 months to go, and we're going to be wiped out. I mean, you'd probably be trying to figure out a way to get out of the empire, to get away from where they were, or to hide somewhere, but really there would be no hiding. And so Haman, he had a lot of pride. He had a plan, and he figured there's no way out of this because it's been signed, it's been written, it's been signed by the king, and therefore it cannot be changed. And so I'm pretty sure he was pretty arrogant and cocky at that point and thought nothing can go wrong here. So a copy of the document was to be issued as law in every province, being published for all people, that they should be ready for that day. And so for Haman and the enemies of the Jews, I mean, it was a time of anticipation. Boy, we get to wipe them out. And you can look at your neighbor over there that's a Jew and say, boy, we can wipe them out. I like their house better than my house. We'll move over next door once we wipe them out. Or we'll take whatever item it is, we can take it for our own. I mean, that's just that mindset that we have in society today where people will kill someone for a pair of tennis shoes or a pair of sunglasses or whatever it may be, just for little things, just for the sake of killing them. And you don't think about the importance of a life, the importance of a person, the value of a soul. And so, again, we see that same attitude today. But whatever the case may be, the people were commanded, we'll wipe them out on that day. The couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan, the citadel. So they sent it all out. I like the way it puts it here in the book on page 47, middle of the page, just above where it says the decree issued. It says the suspense is great. Will Esther risk her life in hopes of saving her people? Can Haman's irrevocable law be overturned or countered? Will the unseen God deliver the Jews from their enemy? If we didn't know the rest of the story, I mean, it would be an exciting, suspenseful time right now, wouldn't it? What's going to happen? How are they going to be able to work this out? How can they escape, or will they escape? What's going to happen? But we know, like Paul Harvey said, the rest of the story. Of course, God's in control, watching over these things, and it's a reminder to us that we'll find ourselves in situations like that at times. You ever find yourself in a situation? How can I work all this mess out? And maybe it's a mess of our own doing, or somebody else's mess they've made, and we just wonder, or how can I survive this? And yet we got to put our faith and trust in God, and not in our strength, but in God's strength, not in our wisdom, but in God's wisdom, and that's what you see here. Any comments?
God punishes evil with evil, always.
Okay, punishes evil with evil. Okay, I mean, you look at the.
Not for us to do, but God did.
Yeah. I mean, he used some pretty vicious people to punish his people at times. I mean, when you start looking at the Babylonians, you start looking at the Assyrians, and one thing I always remember about the Assyrians, they would put sometimes fish hooks through their prisoners' lips and have it, attached to a chain or to a rope and lead them kind of like on a leash as they carried them off into captivity. I mean, or put people's eyes out and kill their family in front of them and then put their eyes out or whatever it may be. Just brutal people. I mean, it would be almost merciful at times for some of the people that were carried off into captivity to have been killed rather than go through what they went through. But now, you look at the situation when you're carried off into captivity. I mean, you've lost some loved ones along the way. You're far away from your home. The temple's been destroyed. But then you are relocated. I mean, some of these were relocated, and if you just kind of went in and followed the law there, you could start a new life. I mean, so it wasn't like they were all imprisoned somewhere. I mean, some were treated more harshly than others, depending on who you were. Like the kings at times were treated very brutally if they lived at all. But some of them could start back, and that's why when the children of Israel were put back into the promised land again in the days of Nehemiah, some of the Jews decided to stay off where they were in captivity because that's where they had been born, or they were older, and that's where they had been carried when they were young, and they didn't want to move, and so they were allowed to stay, and that's where we get, Esther and Mordecai and the group of Jews that are there at this time, and so but God, God's ways are different than ours, above ours, and sometimes God can use very evil people to accomplish His will. That doesn't mean He condones their evil and sinfulness, and He'll punish the punisher, later as well for their evil. But God can raise up nations, bring them down, and you see that with the situation here as well. God using the situation, but God will allow it to a certain point. I mean, He doesn't want all the Jews to be wiped out. I mean, He has a promise through them, and He wants some to be saved, and so He's at work there saving the people and doing it through putting Esther in the right place at the right time, and she had the strength to do what needed to be done at that time. Other thoughts?
Mark, these Jews that stayed back in these countries whenever everyone else went home, they're the very ones that Paul went out and met with, to start with, you might say, in the synagogue. That's where he went to preach at, and Paul went to these people that stayed back in the descendants of them.
Yeah, they've been dispersed throughout the known world. Yeah, rather than just staying in the promised land, the land of Israel, they had gone throughout the world, and you have synagogues throughout as well. That's where the synagogue worship kind of began with the captivities. But and so Paul would go into a city and find Jews there and worship with them and start with them that should have been receptive to the word, and then go out to the Gentiles. But so you kind of see that continuing on. Any other thoughts? So you can imagine, this is just an amazing thing. Can you imagine a proclamation going out through our country saying we're going to wipe out a whole race of people? I think there's some in our country that would like to wipe out some one race, some another race, or whatever it may be. But can you imagine saying, okay, we've set the date for it, and this is when it's going to happen. We're going to completely wipe them off the face of the earth. And that's what's happening here. Again, some people say you go think back to Hitler and what happened with that situation. But they were bound. He's bound and determined to get rid of it. So that's just an earth-shaking thing, even for those people. That's amazing, and they're trying to figure out what's going on here. There's a reason why that happened. I mean, and I don't think most people would figure out. Haman got his feelings hurt, and so he's taking it out on a whole race of people he didn't like anyway. But notice verse 15. So after this goes out, the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. So what's the attitude of the king and Haman? Nonchalant. Just sit down and have a drink. It's just life as usual. Nothing changed. It's not like, this is going to be bad. It's going to be difficult. It's a difficult thing to do. It's just another command going out. Another race of people wiped out. Life goes on. Eat, drink, and be merry. It's just hard to understand sometimes how callous people can be, how cold they can be. I read stories about people that commit terrible crimes, and just the mindset of some people is just hard to understand. You watch some of these people that have committed like serial killers, and you start reading their stories and just how evil those people are. And it's not just a matter of killing people and the things they did to them, but some of the families of the victims want some closure there and want to know, you know, did you kill my loved one? Because, you know, they're missing. If you did, where are they? You know, where did you bury them? What happened to them? And they just toy with them. I mean, you know, and just play off their emotions. And some will eventually tell some of the family, but most of the time they'll go to their death not telling them, because it's just void of those feelings that you should have. And it's just hard to imagine that. And here's the king, here's Haman, and you realize there's going to be a lot of folks, and not just, you're not wiping out just evil people. I'm sure some of the Jews weren't perfect people, weren't what, you know, none of us are, but you're talking about people, adults, children, old, young, men, women, wipe them all out on one day. And then you just sit down and have a drink. You know, it's just hard to imagine such, but the king doesn't understand really what's going on. He doesn't see what's playing out here. He'll learn later. And then Haman, he knows, and he's probably celebrating, drinking his drink. But the city of Shushan was perplexed.
Mine says
Confused. What does that mean when they're perplexed or confused? What's going on with them? The average man on the street.
Probably trying to figure out why this is happening to them.
Yeah, what's going on here? You know, I mean, you see some things and you try to trace it back. Why is this person acting the way they are? Why is this law enacted? And, you know, if you can figure out why, it can help you to understand a little bit more. And they, you know, out of the blue, we'll go wipe out an entire race of people. Everybody's asking, what's going on here? You know, why them? And if it's them, some of the other people may think of a different race, may think, are we next? You know, we want to find out what's going on here because we might be the next one on the chopping block. You know, sometimes people don't worry when certain things happen to certain people, and they don't realize, you know, that could be happening to you next. And, you know, if you don't take care of things now, it can be your head on the chopping block next. And so the city's perplexed. They're confused. They're trying to figure out what's going on here. So it kind of sets the scene again. It's all unfolding. And so as people, you know, as the proclamation goes out, what's going on? You know, and you start looking around. Who are the Jews? You know, you may not have questioned a person's ancestry, you know, what race they were. You know, you couldn't really just tell by looking. It would not be as obvious as maybe a black and a white person would be, you know, looking at different races there, or maybe, you know, someone that's white and brown skin. You know, they'd probably all favor each other as far as looks, but you go back to ancestry, and you can look at a different ancestry that's there. And so they're starting to question some things. And somebody might want to trace their ancestry back to make sure that they don't have any Jewish blood in them, and it winds up that they're killed as well.
The Hebrew origin was up around that region.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the thing, yeah, I mean, you'd have that, like we think about Middle Eastern kind of look about you, and so, well, the king had married Esther, and she's a Jew, and he didn't realize it. So, you know, it's going to be probably a lot of surprises. It'll be a lot of surprises along the way at that point. So that sets the stage again. We go in step by step here. Esther has not come into this yet. We don't hear what Mordecai has to say, but as we finish up with this chapter, the next chapter opens up, and Mordecai comes into play, and then Esther as well. Mordecai learned all that had happened. I mean, it's been proclaimed not only in the capital city, but throughout the whole empire. And so he's heard about what happened. So what does he do? He tears his clothes, puts on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city. He cried out with a loud and a bitter cry. Why did people put on sackcloth and ashes? Mourning, distress. I mean, you see it in a number of instances. I mean, like it's when you're very sad and sorrowful. I mean, you look at, you know, you can look at people like Job, or you can look at other times, other ones in situations where something terrible has happened. They put on sackcloth and ashes because they're sorrowing and they're upset. It can also be a matter of repentance. You look at Jonah going to the people of Nineveh and preaching to them, and they repented with sackcloth and ashes. I mean, you're sorrowing over your sins. You're sorrowing over the situation. you're penitent, you're promising, I'm going to change, I'm going to change, you know, I'm not going to do that anymore. And in fact, they did it to the point that God didn't destroy them at that point because of their repenting with sackcloth and ashes from the greatest to the least of them. And so that's a normal thing that you would see. You know, we tend to hide our emotions most of the time. You don't want, you know, you don't want to show a tear, don't want to shed a tear, don't want to let people see you hurting or whatever. And yet, a lot of people in that culture would show it with great, with you know, just out with great fanfare, I guess you'd say. You know, you have that sackcloth ashes on. And some of it was truly from the heart. I mean, like if you lose a loved one, or if you're really penitent over something that's happening, or you're really stressful over something. Now you'd find the Jews at times, they would hire mourners to come in. If you don't have enough people mourning, you can pay some people to come and mourn over a loved one. And that misses something along the way there. I mean, you know, just paying somebody to mourn and make that show. But Mordecai is not just putting on a show. And he's not doing it just to make a scene. He's doing it because his heart is broken. He's worried about what's going to happen. He cries out with a loud and bitter cry. I mean, he's upset. You think Mordecai knows what started all this? I mean, he knows that he was trying to do what he thought was right, I guess, you know, by not bowing down to Haman. But he realized that his personal conflict has exploded to the point that it's going to destroy all of his people, I mean, the whole nation. The things we do, can it affect a lot of people? I mean, little things we do. It can, can't it? I mean, you think about, you know, if we do something we shouldn't do, and a lot of people see us, you know, or say something we shouldn't say, and you realize the wrong people were listening, you know, or whatever, it can cause a lot of trouble, and it can go beyond ourselves. I mean, here is a personal conflict between Haman and Mordecai, and it has escalated on a global, really just about a global situation here, I mean, throughout the empire. And I'm sure he was upset over that part. He realized, boy, I've started something here. But really it wasn't him, it was Haman. And so, but whatever the case may be, he realized a lot of life, a lot of innocent lives are going to be taken. And so he puts on the sackcloth, he puts ashes on himself. He is perhaps a lot, you know, repenting of whatever's in his life, crying out to God for help. But he is stressful, he is upset. And he went as far as the front of the king's gate. So we've seen him at, you know, the gate to the city, gate to the palace before. But the reason he didn't go in, I mean, you could get permission to go in, but no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. Why couldn't you go into the king's gate with sackcloth on you, Matt? You suppose? Kind of ruin the atmosphere, I guess. You know, the king, you know, you want to be positive, upbeat, have a good time. We've seen him drinking on a number of occasions here. You know, just maybe he likes to be happy and jolly or whatever. I don't know, but.
Do we have a time of this type stuff ever happening in the New Testament?
Of what's that?
Sackcloth and ashes?
I don't remember any at that point. Yeah, you have it in the Old Testament throughout, but as far as like the culture in first century, I don't remember. I'd have to look back. Does anybody remember anything in the New Testament with people with putting sackcloth and ashes on?
Changed to fasting.
You have fasting. Yeah, I mean you read more about the fasting over sorrowful thing, but I have to look into that a little bit more. That's interesting. Do you know of any? You don't know of any instances. I really don't. And I guess I'm having a hard time thinking of one because there may not be.
Well, you know, there are lots of times in the New Testament where people, Paul and several others, Peter and some of them could have put on sackcloth and ashes.
Yeah, I'll have to.
It happened to them.
Yeah, but you see them at times fasting. You see them usually fasting and praying.
Fasting.
Yeah, fasting. But that's a different. And of course, Jesus stressed it more from the inward rather than the outward. I'm talking about when they would fast, don't disfigure your face, and I mean, I guess don't look like you're hurting and hungry. And I guess the sackcloth and ashes may draw more attention from outside, and it became more inward. You know, that'd be what I'd say off the top of my head. But we'll look into that a little bit, or I will, unless somebody has some words of wisdom here. But of why it's not in there but why did it change? But, and maybe it's going more inward at that point. But,
Some of that during the 8th to 10th century, the practice fell to the wayside and the penitential season of Lent started.
okay. And they, okay, so, yeah, I'll
So it was carried on, just like mentioned in the Bible and discussed.
there was, somebody was talking to me about Lent and what they're going to give up for Lent. And they said they thought about giving up road rage, and just getting mad, hollering and yelling at people. They decided it'd be easier to give up sweets for 40 days than it would be to give up road rage. They said, I like to honk my horn and yell at people. I'd rather go without sweets for 40 days. What?
Either one will kill you.
Do what?
I say either one will kill you.
Yeah, but one makes you happier, I guess. I don't know. I guess either one can make you happy depending on. But I laugh about that. But you think about, and I'm not saying we need to do that like the Lent season or whatever. But there are things that maybe we could give up for a time or give up permanently as well.
Wearing sackcloth was pretty common during the Depression years in our country.
Yeah, for different reasons, kind of. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a rough type of material, of course. You think about cloth for sacks and the ashes upon you, but it's a sign of sorrowing. It's a time of repentance. And so here you picture Mordecai, evidently an influential person. Now all of a sudden here he is in sackcloth and ashes. He's crying out, and people see him, and he's out at the front gate, but you can't go into the king's palace with sackcloth and ashes on you. And in every province where the king's command and decree arrived, there was great mourning among the Jews. And here's fasting and weeping as well, and wailing. And many lay in sackcloth and ashes. I mean, they're upset. And you can imagine, again, if you knew that your execution was coming, it's just a matter of months. And nothing, what can I do about it? Where can I go to get away from it? Because wherever I go, the king's command's there, and somebody's going to be out for me. You can understand why they'd be mourning so greatly, why they'd be weeping and wailing. And they're looking at, we're supposed to be God's people. We've been carried into captivity, but we're still alive. I mean, why is this happening to us? So Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her, so she's kind of isolated there in the palace. She doesn't know everything that's going on. But when the word does come to her, and they've heard the word on the street, they've heard what's going on. They tell her about Mordecai and what's going on with Mordecai as well. And she was upset. She was really upset about Mordecai, first and foremost. I mean, there's one that her cousin who raised her as her, she's basically like a father figure to her. Then she sent garments to clothe Mordecai and to take his sackcloth away from him, but he would not accept them. Why would she try to put regular clothes on him? So he wouldn't get in trouble? Okay. Draw attention to the fact. People could put two and two together. I mean, if Mordecai is out there in sackcloth and ashes, he must be a Jew. If he's a Jew, Esther's a Jew. Could be some self-survival there. What else? Yeah, I mean, trying to keep him out of trouble, her out of trouble.
Feel sorry for him.
Sorry. She may have wanted him as well to be able, for them to be able to come in and talk with each other. He couldn't get into where she was without permission, and he was not going to get permission as long as he had sackcloth and ashes on. So maybe clean yourself up, get yourself fixed up, and maybe we can sit down and meet with one another and talk about this. There could be some of that as well. But she didn't like to see him. Sometimes we see people hurting and sorrowful, and we don't know what to do. You just try to, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. And you try to calm them down, and you don't know how to handle the situation or how to make it better. And that may be some of it as well. Just take off that. Let's not be drawing attention to ourselves. It doesn't say, but basically she wants him to put on some clothes and not be in such sorrow. But he wasn't going to do it. I mean, he's sorrowful, and he has the right to be. Esther called Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her, and she gave him a command concerning Mordecai to learn what and why this was. What's going on here? And so, so she doesn't really get to the bottom of it right now. So maybe it's just more of a personal situation here, and it's going to.
Apparently was not in the loop in knowing about what was coming down the road.
Well, she's just a queen, So, no, I mean the king's in charge, and if you're isolated in the palace, you can. There's the gossip that goes around, but if you're not in the loop you can be sort of isolated about what's happening. And so at this point, she's figuring it out little by little. So the eunuch goes out to Mordecai in the city square that was in front of the king's gate. So at this point, she's going to learn the rest of the story. So she's just trying to straighten Mordecai up.
She has to learn it secondhand, though.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting. And also, he tries to get her to go in before the king at this point. What'd she say, 30 days since he called her before him? And so, I mean, she may be his wife. He may think she's wonderful, but they wasn't side by side day in and day out either. So not your normal husband-wife relationship there, you wouldn't think at all. But Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasury to destroy the Jews. So Haman just lays it out there. He says, here's what's happening, here's what's going on. And it's Haman that's doing all of this. He also gave him a copy of the written decree for their destruction, which was given at Shushan, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and that he might command her to go into the king to make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. So here's the actual writing. Here's what's been announced in Shushan throughout the whole empire as well. You take a copy of this, you give it to Esther, and you tell her, I'm commanding her to go before the king. Could he command her? Yes or no? I said no. It's two ways of looking at it. I mean, she's the queen, but I don't care if your daughter or adopted daughter or whatever is a queen or not. That's your daughter as well. So he may be trying to pull the father rank there and say, you do what I say. You take care of this. And so he can be a little bit more bold with it. And what does he have to lose? What's the worst that could happen anyway? The king kill him? He's going to kill him anyway. But he knows that Esther, if anyone can stop this, Esther can. There's no, that's the best answer to it. So once she realizes what's going on and he's pushing her, saying, here's what you need to do, surely she'll do it. So Hathach returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. So Esther sends word back from Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. So you can't just get on your cell phone and call each other. So he's getting his exercise going back and forth between the two of them. All the kings, here's what she said back to Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court of the king, who has not been called, he has but one law, put all to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. Yet I myself have not been called to go into the king these 30 days. So she's saying, look, we know the law. I mean, it's laid out there. It's plain. Every citizen of the empire knows that if you try to go in and talk to the king without being invited or called in, you'll be executed unless the king extends his scepter out. Now, if he extends his scepter out, you can come on in. But if he doesn't, it's death to you. Would you go before the king? It'd have to be something pretty important, wouldn't it? But imagine you have something that you really need to tell the king. It's something that's important. You go in and you have not been invited and the king doesn't extend his scepter. You realize it's all over. There's nothing I can do. I'm here in the palace. Here's all the guards around. I'm about to lose my life. And Esther, she wasn't 100% sure that the king would allow her in. I mean, that shows you something there as well. I mean, she knows what type of man he is. And where she may be queen and he may be king, in the back of her mind, she's thinking, he may not extend that scepter to me. Am I really willing to risk it? It's amazing what people will risk their lives for. On a lot of these, YouTube, you ever watch any of these YouTube videos, little shorts and all? There are people that will get on there on these reels, they call them, on Facebook, and they'll have videos where they climb up these tall antennas, hundreds and hundreds of feet up in the air. They'll get out on the edge of something and just kind of swing by their hands. Or they'll jump across things way up, many stories in the air from one building to another. Or I saw somebody in something like the Grand Canyon or something, and there was one little area of ground about this big around, that was from here to Barbara and John away, and he ran and jumped and landed on that one thing, then ran and jumped back. And just all for a video, to get views, to be popular. But you know what happens every once in a while, don't you? The person misses. The person falls. The person's hand cramps. And the parachute doesn't open.
There was a case of that about a month ago.
Yeah, I saw where one guy parachuted was going to parachute off the side. He jumped off this cliff and was going to parachute, and the parachute snagged, and he was hanging from a bush on the side of the thing, trying to get his buddy somehow to get him off the edge of that cliff. And I was thinking, you put yourself in that situation. Yeah, but they do it all for those views. And I thought, how silly, how ridiculous is that? I mean, you're really tempting, tempting life and death there, for what? Just to be popular?
Mark, Esther may have thought that, well, he didn't kill Vashti, so maybe I might have a chance.
He didn't kill. He could have executed Vashti. He just banished her. I mean, I say just, but that's bad enough. But yes, maybe she could think I have a chance. But what the difference between what we're saying here, life and death, it's not just for views or popularity. I mean, it's a matter of saving a race of people. And really not just a race of people. Mordecai's going to say, hey, if you're not interested in the nation, what about your life? It's going to affect you. Sometimes we can kind of close our eyes to what happens to other people, but then when it affects us, it's different. And so, but like you say, maybe she's weighing, I'm sure, all the possibilities there, but she's saying, he hadn't called me in quite a while, in 30 days, and, she's probably thinking, why has he not called me in during that time, and what's going to happen when I walk in? Is he going to extend the scepter or not? Will I live or die, and is it worth it or not? And so Esther sends the servant out there, the eunuch, and he tells Mordecai these words. And then Mordecai told them to answer Esther, do not think in your heart that you will escape the king's palace any more than the other Jews. But for if you remain completely silent at this time, and relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. So he said, look, you may choose not to do anything, but God's still in control, and he'll use somebody else in some other way. He'll save his people. But if you don't rise up to the occasion, you're not going to escape. You'll be punished. You'll lose your life. You and yours will die. But wouldn't it be better to go and to do what you can? Because who knows if you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And again, we see that with Esther, and we can see where she needed to rise to the occasion, and she does rise to the occasion. But in our life, maybe in lesser ways, who knows, maybe even in greater ways, we may have such a time as this moment where we have to stand up and stand against or stand for certain things as well. And then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise, and so I will go to the king, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther commanded him. Why do you think Esther went anyway, even though she thought she might die? Why did she go? Mordecai told her to. I think respect for Mordecai. What else? She loved her people. I mean, there's a lot of things at play here. Self-preservation, first of all. I mean, even if the king doesn't kill me, I might die anyway. And then the respect for Mordecai, respect for God and God's people as well. But she eventually is going to go and like, if I die, I die. But I'm going to go. We'll stop there this week, and then we'll take up with lesson 7 next week and take up in the chapter 5.